Time for our weekly conversation with Josh Pate, who's in studio. Thanks to our friends at Academy Sports and Outdoors that carry a wide selection of the best brands, including Easton, Rawlings, and Wilson. And at Academy, you can shop for the latest bats, gloves, cleats, clothing, protective gear, training equipment, and much, much more. What's up, man?
How about this? Just in-house, I'm out loitering in front of the building, and you say, why don't you come on in instead of doing this on the phone? This is nice. We ought to do this more often.
We should, man. So, and I've told you this before. First time I met you was the 21 season.
Yep.
I had seen your work, and I thought you were great. And we sat next to each other. And sometimes when you sit next to somebody that's kind of like a big deal, you're like, you don't know how they're going to be. You were the night. We became buds by the end of that game. It was the Auburn game that I think Michael Clemens had a fumble return for a touchdown.
Oh, I remember vividly. Yeah. Now I remember vividly.
And then we started doing the show. So I'm so happy to have you here in studio. You were out last night doing what I would probably do when I travel. Late nights of drinking or actually going to the gym.
Yeah, drinking whey, yeah.
Yeah, how was your whey protein?
It was good.
Creatine in the water.
Really good. So the scene yesterday was we were up at SMU and did a whole day up there. So as you know, if you're going to be on the road, you either front load or back load your day so you can get a lift in one way or the other. So I figured we get out of there by 12:30, 1, 2. We can get down here, check in, nice meal via Uber Eats, of course, who doesn't sponsor the show today. And went over to the gym. So you know that I'm not exactly plugged into the college basketball scene. But the conference tournament will come to me in Nashville. Yeah. And from that point forward, I speak authoritatively on the sport like I've been watching it all year. Okay, well, that point's not here yet. So I'm last night, got the AirPods in, and we're right in the middle of a shoulder workout. And I kind of glance, and A&M's playing Auburn. I said, is it men's or women's? Okay, it's men's. This is not a replay. This is live. Are they up double digits with like less than 5 minutes to go? So from that point, I was glued, and I feel like I could break down the last 5 minutes of the game really thoroughly. I don't think that's what we're here to do, but what a night that must have been last night.
Hey, actually, what I wanted to ask you, and I think Billy will be here in a moment, I wanted to ask you about college football in today's world, okay? Because one thing we know about A&M, when they were at their best last year, they were playing a ball control style of offense. Yep. Le'Veon Moss, I just had him in the studio a couple days ago. He was fantastic. When he was out there, it really made that offense go. My question for you is, in today's college football, how explosive of an offense do you think you have to have, considering teams that have won the national championship the last 5-10 years? Kaylee has some stats for us if we need to pull them up, but teams that run the ball well, Ohio State last year, I don't think they were – what was Ohio State running the ball last year?
18th in total rushing yards.
Okay. Not bad.
Yeah.
Can you win with that style in today's college football if you also can back it up with that kind of defense? And I think the answer is yes.
Yeah. I would ask you, what happens if we just take the Notre Dame team from this past year and turn the volume up offensively like 15%? Because they were in the national championship game as it was.
Right.
But yet you and I are probably sitting there watching them going into that Monday night, inexplicably late January, Monday night, and saying, yeah, but it's probably going to take some mistakes from Ohio State. Okay, well, that's because you knew they probably couldn't score a whole lot on their own. But outside of that, every other element you're talking about is there. So the thing I noticed about Ohio State this year is there were times where they were extremely explosive, looked like a pinball offense. There were other times where you remembered, oh, they got Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins back there.
Yeah.
The quarterback can fall forward for a first down if you need him to. And that was Chip Kelly. That was a loaded talent roster. But what that was being sort of multiple in your approach and understanding the ones that are going to cut through, like the teams that can win 3 or 4 games in a college football playoff setting are probably ones who are B- or better in several categories instead of just A+ and then F elsewhere across the board. So I don't know in the future if we'll look at a stat column the way we used to and say, you've got to be at least this, at least this, at least this. I think more stylistically, you got to be able to do several things at least decently because you're not coming up on 1 or 2 teams. You're coming up on 3 or 4 teams by a process of elimination. They're all going to be some of the best in the country, and you're facing some of the best defensive coordinators in the country. So you got decent talent. You could be multiple. That's, to me, what I'm looking for.
Well, and I also think there are seasons, right, inside of college football. And when I say seasons, like the ball control era, the air attack era, like I think it's not a thing until it becomes a thing. Yeah. And I think the 2020 team that A&M had that I think should have been in the playoffs, who knows what they could have done with that style of football in that 14 playoff.
Yeah, and you made a good point there. So we're all trained to look at any aspect of society in the past as era.
You're right.
And yet you never know, like what did people call the era while they were in what we've come to define as the era? You could be talking about fashion just as easily as you could be talking about college football, music, etc. The skill, I think Elko's really good at this. The skill is in understanding what's sort of around the corner. I would go as far as to say A&M athletics, given the big deal they just signed this past week. It's all the same. It's all the same philosophy that has to permeate your building of like seeing around the corner, having that 10th floor perspective where you can see not just down the street, but you can see several blocks down. If I'm recruiting, like if I'm casting a vision, you don't cast a vision and then snap your fingers and it happens. And if it doesn't work out, we can just try something different the next day or the next week. If he snaps his fingers over there, it's a 2-year process to implement thoroughly whatever you're talking about. And so if you don't have foresight, if you don't understand what era you're in, then you're dead. You don't know it yet, but you're dead.
Yeah. What do you think about what they're doing across the street? I know you've always had a high opinion of what they can be, but considering the way last season ended and the changes they've already made, they've added to their secondary, right? Their running backs are, if healthy, going to be one of the best in the SEC, again, because Le'Veon was phenomenal last year. They've added wide receivers to the group. There's some question marks about the defensive line, but based on the intel you have right now, how do you feel about A&M?
So I think they backfilled really well, and I think it sucked to end the season the way they did. The blessing of that is if you do that, you don't want to do it like Lincoln Riley just did. You don't want to do it in your third year. You want to do it very early in your tenure. Kalen DeBoer, I think, is dealing with this at Alabama, too. So the blessing in sucking down the stretch is that there's no guesswork of what is the right way and isn't the right way. He gets to walk down the halls with proof of performance or lack of proof of performance in doing it one way. And so it's the Etch-a-Sketch. It just clears the mechanism.
Yep.
And so this is the way we're going. This is who does and doesn't need to be here. We tried it this way. It doesn't work. It's going to be my way, or it's going to be no way moving forward. And the other part of that in this era, because I've talked about this a lot with Bama, in this era, you cannot just come into a program and take over and do it the way you would have in 1978, because guys have options now they didn't in 1978. Sure. And so to a certain extent, especially if you come in sort of late in a cycle, you got to handle the situation with kid gloves a little bit in the first go-round. But then when you're in the second, third, fourth year, guys have had several portal cycles where they could have chosen to leave. So everyone who's left by this point, those are your guys. They have chosen through multiple exit doors there. They've chosen, nope, I'm foregoing that. I'm staying here. And so I think the way last year ended, if you want to always draw a positive on a negative, that's the positive to draw.
Hello, Billy.
Hey, David.
Well. How'd your night go?
It was great, that game. And then, I mean, what happens after these games is we went, I think I had a half, like the neck of a beer, maybe. Went home, and then you go, okay, it's later than you think with these college basketball games these days, because now they're going like, some of them go 2 hours 45, then we waited for all the post-game festivities. So still get home after midnight, and then I get locked into watching SEC Now. You know, after a big win like that, you watch SEC Now. So that's what actually kept me up.
Yeah,
that was what got me. And then Terry Black's yesterday in Austin, went and picked my buddy up at the airport, and
turkey,
but a lot of food, and then dinner. Lupe tortillas, some fajitas, which who knows, maybe will make you late for your flight today. We'll see, but that was it's a long day.
Your life, Lucci's life.
I mean, really, all I just said was I ate 2 meals.
I mean, I've heard
one in a different city.
I've watched the behind the music, like Guns N' Roses in the '80s, Sunset Strip, but just
this is a different level.
Lucci on a basketball Tuesday, next level. Next level.
It could have been.
And Trish Pate owns about 50 of these, by the way.
This particular cup?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So my boy, I'm going to be real quick because I know everyone wants to hear Pate. My boy from Vegas, he had never been to a Buc-ee's, so we stopped at the one in Bastrop. This dude bought like 6 coffee mugs.
Just
like
so
coffee mugs, like the big size Buc-ee head, some silhouetted one, something. He went back. You know, you live in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
the souvenir capital of the world, and he's Buc-ee's. Couldn't believe it.
Maybe hit a quick trip on the way out. I don't know.
That's right. I can't say that without you saying Quick Trip. It's all right. They're not a sponsor of ours.
No,
so
absolutely
neither
not.
one of them are.
Absolutely
so.
not.
Go ahead, David.
I last segment I talked to him. I wouldn't mind you jumping in about winning in college football today's era, which we were trying to define what the era is. Can you be ball controlled in today's era? Do you have to have explosive offense? I think A&M is going to have a explosive offense next year that can also be a hybrid ball control. We're just kind of talking about that.
I think you need to be that. I think you need to be what he said, because I still think what teams, and I'm sure in your infinite wisdom and recall, which is this is where I'm not going to be as strong, the recall of who has won a national title without being able to line up and control the line of scrimmage, and without being able to line up and stop the run to some extent. You're talking about offensively, though, so let's keep it there. Ohio State sure as heck could run it. Texas, for all their bells and whistles and all the Matthew Golden with the 4.29 and all the receivers, the way they run, and Quinn Ewers and Gunnar Helm, what'd they do when they came in here to Kyle Field? They ran for 300 yards. There were other games where they had to run the football in order to win. So I really don't think you can win a title without being able to do both.
Yeah, here's what tricks you. So if you watch the NFL, what works, and what doesn't work, doesn't work. You're playing a pro team every week. In college, you can get fooled because if you're at a top 15 program, therefore you're recruiting at a top 15 level, you will outclass, 80% of the teams you play.
Yeah.
Which means unless you turn the ball over a whole lot, you can afford to play almost any style you want, and to varying degrees, you're going to win. But that's not what determines college football. What determines college football, you mentioned Texas there. Mm-hmm. Doesn't really matter what they did against everyone else. They ran into brick walls twice against Georgia, and they were like 2 yards per carry, and that's ultimately what you end up spending the entire winter talking about, is that stat. And you pride yourself on recruiting big humans. That's one of the talking points over there, which it should be. That's what you should be doing. But yet, and they had some injuries in fall camp at running back, and that ended up biting them later in the year. So some of that's out of your control. But to your point, people think about Steve Sarkisian, and whether they're right or not, they think about explosivity, pushing the ball down the field, and yet all he's over there talking about is, but when it comes time, we got to be able to convert tough yards on the ground. So not every coach mentions that first out of their mouth, but the ones who are going to be there at the end, all of them are talking about that.
And what killed A&M last year, when they lost like Le'Veon, short yardage. There's that, infamous 1 yard here across the street that they couldn't get twice against Texas. Then a couple weeks later, what happened? Texas had it. They rolled down the field at second and goal from the 1, couldn't get it in. So, those things will haunt you. But also you do have to have explosive playmakers on the perimeter and a quarterback that can do it, because then I would say, look at Riley Leonard and Notre Dame.
Yeah, well, also, so Ohio State's a perfect example. So Jeremiah Smith goes off 1 week, and I can't remember the back-to-back opponents that it was against, but he goes
Oregon, then Texas,
it was
then
the
Notre
playoff.
Dame.
Yeah, so he goes off against Oregon. Well, if memory serves me, I think he had 1 catch for 3 yards against Texas.
Yeah.
But they won both games. They just won them different ways, which is what we're talking about here, and what we were talking about before you got in. It's like the profile of the team or teams that are going to be Final Four, Final Two, national champ are going to be ones where if you go back over the course of a season, they didn't win one way. They won like 4 or 5 ways.
Yeah. And along with that, you have to win games with defense.
Sure.
You have to. You Ohio State had to do that against Nebraska. They, Texas did that here at Kyle Field. Notre Dame did it a lot. Like there are going to be games where your offense isn't going to be enough to win you a football game.
Yeah.
So
I don't want this to turn into a debate. I don't even know if it will be a debate, but you mentioned Brian Kelly, top 10 coach. And
resume.
And I don't disagree. Is he coaching at a top 10 level right now?
That can be debated. And certainly if you're forward facing, he wouldn't be one of my first 10 hires if I'm hiring at Pate State today. So if we're asking it that way, that's a no. If you're asking about current output, off the top of my head, I think it would be fringe at best.
Yeah.
probably 10 to 15 range, maybe 8 to 15 range, being fair. What they screwed up around there is the defensive side of hiring at the outset. Same thing Lincoln's dealing with right now. Now, to the fairness of both guys, I think they made the right moves, or I think organizationally, whoever pulled the lever, they made the right moves. The problem is, are you afforded the patience at LSU or USC to start making what should have been day one moves 3 years in? And you got to ask each fan individually that, because if the answer is yes, okay, that means they're willing to give you some grace for 2 years. I don't know if year 3, year 4, year 5 grace is something they're interested in Baton Rouge, because for better or for worse, if I pay you that much money, I'm not paying to experiment. I'm paying for a sure thing, or as sure a thing as we can get in college football. But the thing that you're referencing is last week, I said something I didn't think was debatable. Like, Saban's not around anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Mac Brown was another former national championship winner. He's gone. We only have 3 active head coaches who have won championships. We've only got 8 active head coaches who have won a playoff game.
Wow. When you said that, that surprised me.
So I said, well, Kelly's got a top 10 resume, and everyone pushed back because he hasn't won the big one, which, okay, he hasn't won a title. He hasn't won a playoff game. If that's your barometer, then find me 10 others who fit that criteria. And if I ask that on air, I already know the answer. It's going to be a trick question. And so then you get the whole ad hominem attack, and I just don't like him. Well, a lot of guys I don't like that I'd rank top 10. That's a totally different thing.
Yeah, I'm a big ad hominem attack guy myself. But I agree with you. I mean, it's a top 10 resume. I think the difference in Kelly and Lincoln, I guess, is it how good Kelly's first year, or how surprising it was. Maybe bought him some good. There's not a lot of goodwill to go around in Baton Rouge and LSU football, right? There's more king cake than there is goodwill. But maybe he bought a little, but I'm with you. Like, to me, Brian Kelly he's not on any kind of hot seat this year, but he is on the pre-hot seat, in my opinion, because of what they did in the portal, and I think they did good work, but they have ratcheted up expectations again in Baton Rouge, and they think they've got the defense fixed. If they go out and go 8-4, which can happen like that in this conference, right? Like, look at Ole Miss last year.
Yeah.
If they go out and go 8-4, or if they even a 9-3, they're kind of, 9-3 playoff contender.
9-3 with 3 blowouts is a lot different than one possession loss.
Yeah, and so, but I mean, if they go out and don't achieve this year, then I think a year from now he would absolutely be on the hot seat, and they would be fed up.
So the one thing that I think factors in here is, if you come into a place like LSU, it's no different than this place. If you come in and you fully immerse yourself in the culture, you embrace it, you build so much equity immediately. He did not do that. He wiped the building clean of Louisiana flavor. And so as long as you win immediately, that won't matter.
Yeah.
You cannot come in, wipe a place like LSU clean of Louisiana people inside the building, and not get the job done. Because that's when people go back to the bank of, all right, well, how much do I like this guy? Like how much room, how much leeway has he bought in my heart if I live in Thibodaux, Louisiana? Not a whole lot. So you said he's not in the hot seat. I agree. LSU's the kind of place where if you don't have the equity built up, it can go from not being hot seat to off the rails in the middle of a season, because we've seen it happen.
Yeah.
So one thing I've seen about them the last few years is they lose that opening game. Again this year, they have a tough non-conference game at Clemson. By the way, where's Dabo in this conversation?
Dabo's solidly top 10. Dabo's legacy's already been made, though. There's no, if Dabo won a title this year, it would be a crazy story, but it would be another title for him.
Sure.
If Kelly won it, it would be transformative, because I'm not arguing. Like, I don't get pushback on Dabo for the ring culture.
Resume is Dabo 2?
Yeah, I would say so. You know, Dabo his resume is so good that I think if we were to be asked, describe Clemson or Dabo in 1, 2, or 3 words, we would do some form of they're regressing a little bit, but they're still the best in their conference. They're still recruiting at a top 15 average level.
Would we say Kirby's ahead of Dabo?
I would.
I would, too.
Yeah, I would.
But, I mean...
to me, Dabo did it with 2 different quarterbacks, 2 different, similar teams. Kirby did it with Stetson Bennett, right? I don't know. I look at what Dabo did over a longer period of time, and I might favor Dabo, but I do think the last few years, weigh heavy on me too.
I would also think that you want a pro Dabo, I would say where he brought Clemson from.
Sure.
Mark Richt had them 10-2. It felt like every year, 9-3, 10-2. But I would say Kirby came up through the SEC to do it, and then through peak SEC. That's why I would go slight Kirby. Here's something I want to ask you A&M wise. You're going to talk to Mike Elko, or is it, right?
Yeah, later today,
I
actually.
just said that.
Yeah, I don't know if
live.
you're
I'm
allowed
like,
to.
sometimes we keep secrets around here. But what's one or two topics you're really most interested in tackling with him? Because I talked to him the other day, and I want to see
Well, I remember
something I hadn't thought of.
when we were here for the Missouri game this year, I got in early on a Friday and went and just sat in his office and talked to him for a little while. And I always love asking this of newer head coaches. How much of your thing, your program, your blueprint can you implement in 1 year? And the answer is never 100%.
Yeah.
Nobody ever tells me 100%. And he didn't either. He said, you've got the critical factors that you want to hang on the wall, but it's a multi-year process.
Yeah.
And the thing that we just talked about with David there, you get paid more money, so people think, oh, that speeds up what reality is, and it doesn't. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the way they ended the season was terrible. Mm-hmm. And what I perceived was, all right, we come in here for the Missouri game. They blow them out. Would you say best game they played last year?
Yeah, best game, and LSU was best half.
Yeah.
Yep.
So after the Missouri game, I don't feel prior to Missouri they were on anyone's radar because they lost the Notre Dame game, and so then they beat Missouri, and then they're on everyone's radar, and then they proceed to falter down the stretch. So basically, they won when no one was looking, and then they lost when everyone was looking.
Yeah.
Is that just coincidence? Is there something more psychologically you can glean from that? And then, of course, you want to know about the guys they got in.
Yeah.
You just want to, like what I love to do with those guys is I love to toss something out like a softball. And I prefer not to do the Q&A interview stuff.
Yeah, I don't
see where they go with it.
Yeah, I don't think. And he's so easy to talk to. I didn't prepare anything, and we sat here and talked.
Yeah.
We had that 10 minutes before we went on, and none of it had to do with football. You just dive in with Coach Elko, and if you're paying attention, it's a fun interview where you can just go anywhere with it. But I think the part he alluded to that, that they were 7-1, and they operated a lot better with that chip on their shoulder, and no one expects anything from us. And they went and won at the Swamp. They went, there was the Missouri game, went up to Jerry World and had a 4-quarter fight with Arkansas, LSU, and then it went down after that. And I think it's a twofold. I think part of it is, that's a cultural thing. Like you said, it doesn't matter how much you're paid. That usually takes. He told me when he first got here, I said, when is it your program? He said, it takes a full year, an entire offseason, an entire recruiting cycle, an entire portal cycle, an entire season, and then, to get it to where it needs to be, at least in terms of what the expectation is on both sides.
Yeah.
The other thing I was fascinated by, and I'm sure you can dig into it with him, is him talking about just kind of, you said the end of year disappointment, and so much of that with him, David, as you know, seemed to be and was on the defensive side of the ball, and his comments after that bowl game, and to hear him talk about he is now going to take on play calling, calling the defense on, because he could have gone a lot of ways with that, He could have gone a lot of different ways in terms of adjusting his staff, in terms of, just revamping what Bateman was doing. But his decision was to go in and I'm going to work with Jay, but I'm going to be calling the defenses on Saturday.
Yeah.
So I think that's really fascinating as you go into year 2 of his tenure.
Josh, I know you got to get going. Thanks very much, man. Appreciate
Absolutely.
you. Let's do it
Appreciate you
again.
having me.
I got one more question for him.
Yeah, what's up? It's going to be a funny one.
No,
Here we
it's
go.
not. I know.
Hey, who won in a wrestling match? You or Josh?
I presented that as a funny one, and now I've got 2 more questions because I know what time he's got to be there. He's got a second here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Just before, by the way.
Oh, well, you didn't tell me that.
Well, it's on the rundown.
Okay. So I do not read your
I know,
rundown.
trust me, I
So, who is your sleeper team in the SEC this year, and who is your off the radar player of the year candidate?
Ooh, player in the SEC,
In
player
the
of
SEC.
the year. So I don't even know if Keelan Russell is going to start for Alabama.
Wow.
If he does, it's because he's a star. So that's an off-the-radar one. The off-the-radar team is Florida, simply because they will be discounted. They've got like top 15 national title odds, and their over-under win total 6.5.
I saw that. I was shocked.
It's just detachment because of schedule. They play an insane schedule. You want to know another one that got shafted was Oklahoma. Look at Oklahoma's schedule versus Texas.
Oh, I know. And don't say that, because they will come after me. And we know one person in particular that will come after me on Twitter if I ever say anything about Texas' schedule. But I'm still going to do it. I don't care if you get all these likes talking.
The majority of their strength of schedule rating will come from playing Ohio State, which is an out-of-conference game.
Yeah.
They got it set up for it. It's not their fault,
No.
I don't think. But
It might not
it
be
is
their
what it
fault,
is.
you're saying, but it could be their doing.
There you go.
But if I'm A&M, you don't have a big complaint. The Aggie schedule last year, this one will be tougher this year, but it was set up very nicely for year one of a head coach, as you can in the SEC. So it's not a complaint. If I was in Norman, Oklahoma, I would have
That's tough.
a big complaint, because they both came in together, and I do think it sets up for a lopsided first couple of years in that league. And if anyone's going to suffer from that, it's Brent Venables. My next one was, he's taking. I wasn't going to do this, but he's taking jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I heard.
Um,
Not from him. I heard through intermediaries that David's been rolling.
Just for one day, if there's a media war, I want to be ready.
Yeah. Well, don't we all?
Yeah, we got to
Don't
be
we
ready.
all?
Yeah.
well, I got you too, so I'm fine.
Is there a lot that you know that would make you a deadly weapon if you were to get in a fight with
zero.
someone?
If anybody from Brazos Valley MMA heard me talking about it, they're like, dude, that's the worst guy in
I've
class.
seen the approach.
I'd love to
There
see you
may or
see it
may
for
not
real.
have been a stunt outside where my deal
wow.
is, if you're going to come at me in some kind of crab stance, I mean, I'm just going to I'm more of like, have you seen this guy, the Tappy guy on Twitter, where it's kind of like a Steven Seagal, and that's kind of, I'm just going to kind of do this, and you're going to just be flopping around as you come.
I invite you.
I'm just going to use your momentum against you, like
We're
Seagal
in two different weight classes. You're taller. You're bigger than me. I would invite you to go to the cage, and we can find out.
So to go on a mat and roll around.
Yeah,
Well,
No,
firstly,
thank you.
the Josh Foundation will put up significant charity money for this. Secondly,
Could we
what
get
a
a quick
straight
stop?
Seagal. What a straight Seagal this morning. Wow.
I'm sorry, I didn't
Jeez.
realize I was sitting with
If he
that.
was watching, he's out now. Check the live chat.
There you go.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Is Seagal in jail?
What, are you
Did you
assuming
say
that?
something? Is he out?
No, I'm asking if he's in the live chat. I didn't know like penitentiary viewership was something you focused
I
on.
thought you meant he was.
He was out.
Yeah.
Wait, he's in jail?
I'll DM
No,
him. Let's
Seagal
DM
is
him
not
off air.
in jail.
Okay, just making sure.
Year 2 under Mike Elko, much improved. Steven Seagal not incarcerated that we know of.
Liam Neeson, better than
Maybe
Steven Seagal.
we can get Seagal to an A&M game next year.